Buenas tardes. Llegamos a la última sesión del día. Espero que todavía estén despiertos y estén acompañándonos. Los que quieran ponerse de pie, estirarse un poco, tomar un poco de energía, háganlo, que es bueno para levantarse un poco, y tenemos una sesión bastante interesante. Tenemos tres super speakers. Vamos a hablar sobre sostenibilidad, aceite de oliva, y vamos a hablar también de cómo integrar todo esto con tecnologías como la inteligencia artificial. The first speaker of today, and I'm going to go straight to the point because we have 45 minutes delay. So we'll follow the same dynamic as the previous session. We will start with the speakers giving their presentation, and we'll reserve the questions for the end. Las preguntas las reservamos para el final. Professor Vasilis Vasiliou is professor at the University of Yale, at the School of Environment, at the School of Medicine, and he will be talking about how to integrate artificial intelligence and oleoculture and how to advance in agricultural development and health. Professor Vasiliou is here to join us. Thank
you very much. So, I prefer this one. Oh, it's over there. Okay. And the slides? Okay, good. So, this is the pointer. There's a pointer. Okay. Okay. That's not my talk. That's not my talk. No, no? No. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying late. I really enjoyed the last session talking about microbiome and biomarkers. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of sense of how to use artificial intelligence to improve the agriculture and the quality of the product of the tree, of the olive tree, but also how we can utilize the artificial intelligence in order to make our research into the next level. And I also would like to discuss with you what are our future plans for coordinating all the efforts in olive oil and Mediterranean diet. Let me see, I'm going to make this. All right. So, as was said, I'm the chairman of the Department of Environmental Health Sciences at Yale School of Public Health. And of course, environmental health sciences is not only the chimneys, it's not only the wastewaters, but it's also what we eat, what we drink, and what is, the natural stuff. I should have an olive tree in here, but I will make it into the next. And of course includes all the other factors that we heard, including the nuclear, and also medication, and also the viruses and so on. So a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, at Yale, was an initiative by the School of the Environment of bringing 40 ideas, or 40 big ideas for a sustainable future, and essentially how to make our planet better. And the whole idea was essentially what the main messages that were from this meeting is: we have to manage better the environment. We have to develop and applying emerging technologies. And of course, these technologies also, include the artificial intelligence, which is not really a technology, but it can combine all the other technologies. Fostering new policy frameworks and tools, and also focusing on incentives, investments in environmental progress and innovation. And So how we can utilize artificial intelligence for improving the agriculture? First of all, you can see that you can have precision farming and data-driven decisions. You can have a better crop monitoring by the way that you can real monitor that you can detect disease and optimizes the crop health. Water prediction and climate modeling. As you know, this is a very important thing, especially this area knows exactly what climate changes means and what the drought means. Supply chain optimization and resource efficacy. And finally, market intelligence and farm management of the system. The whole story, the way that I got into it, it was several years ago when Microsoft decided to invest on Earth. And investing by putting some money, they started with $50 million to include projects that they will improve the future of our planet. So essentially, they trying to develop this artificial intelligence for Earth. And Lucas Joppa, who actually is an adjunct professor in my department, started this initiative. And essentially, what he was planning to do was combine the environmental science and the computer science in order to monitor, model, and manage the Earth and everything. I could spend my entire talk in here. I'm going to give you just one example, which is very relative to what we are talking about. And this is the ag optimized by sun culture. And essentially, this is a company that developed this method and this application, which combines, especially this was developed at areas that they have very low precipitation in water, so the irrigation systems are very rough to work with. And essentially, you can see, you can utilize all the capabilities from here by the soil, by whatever is in the environment, and then you can optimize your production in here. So this is just to show you, this is not a science fiction anymore, this is reality. This is how we're going to move ahead. There is forest management, there is all sorts of programs and projects that were developed based on the Microsoft initiative, and they're still going on. So this is very, very relative, especially for the area here. As you know, Jaén was suffered the climate changes and the drought, which is, you know, it's a killer for the production of olive oil, it's a killer of the production of the olives, and also it will have a major effect in the diet and the health of many people. So this is why we're planning, and this is what I would really like to get people together to trying to work on how we can utilize artificial intelligence, especially for our olive groves. So based on that initiative, I also want to take the artificial intelligence, and there is a fly here, that I wanted to go to use the artificial intelligence for health. And essentially what I want to do, and I'm actually doing it, is combine environmental and health sciences along with the computer sciences to improve human health and develop precision nutrition. Okay, we've heard all these beautiful talks, and I missed the talks in the morning, and I apologize for that, but I know all the area very well, so we're looking for major effects on the olive oil and everything. But what I wanted to do is, and I'll show you an example a little bit later, we need to provide people some mechanistic approaches. We have to convince them that it's not only associations that come out of epidemiological studies or, you know, comparable data sets that we have in there. So we can utilize the artificial intelligence in order to promote that. So what I did is we're collaborating under the umbrellas we'll talk about later of the Yale Olive Science and Public Health Program. And this is a collaboration, this particular is a collaboration between our school, Imperial College of London, the University of Athens, and also we had somebody that Vodafone has provided some funds. But the idea here is precision nutrition, harnessing artificial intelligence for global health and disease. So what I want you to think about it, I mean, we heard all these discussions and everything. It is, we swallow thousands of molecules as a part of our diet. Our coffee, just to give you an example, our coffee has 4,000 chemical compounds in there that they can be distinguished. Olive oil, the olive tree, the olives, everything has a lot of molecules. And everything we eat has a lot of molecules in there. So how we can make sense when we make an epidemiological study and say, okay, olive oil along with high fiber diet has this outcome. What is the mechanism of that? This is what I am, by training a toxicologist, I'm a mechanistic toxicologist, and I always would like to have the environmental, the epidemiological studies supported by biomedical and also, mechanistic studies. So how we can go from, the 1,000 molecules in here and essentially how we can go essentially using our bike to the moon with all these compounds in here. The answer is, actually it's not very simple. The answer is by many ways, but we have to really join forces together in order to do that. So you have thousands of molecules. First of all, we have to have databases that all these molecules can be deposited, can be identified, can be measured by mass spectrometry, that people can use it in randomized trials or, epidemiological studies. Second is, we need to have, in order to do the analysis, such kind of analysis with thousands and thousands of molecules, we need to use the artificial intelligence. We need to develop deep learning algorithms that we can really try to make pathways to understand what is the mechanism of any beneficial effects that we're talking about. And, it could be the olive oil, it could be the phenolic antioxidants we see in the wine, it could be everything. So this is some examples of the work that we have done with Kirill Vasilkov. This is the work that we did for the, for 110 food-related components modulating pathways and motifs related to cancer. So essentially what you do is you find these molecules and then you're using the interacome and the major pathways, either cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes and everything. And then you can try to see how these molecules could interrupt these disease pathways, how they can promote health pathways. And this is all done with, the computer analysis. And this is an algorithm that is well-trained and also needs to be validated afterwards. And this is the research that could complement the epidemiological studies, but also they can be used to generate more hypotheses for the future. So this is another paper we just did, again with machine learning, that we mapped phytochemically rich hyperfoods to fight COVID-19. And actually this paper got a lot of attention from BBC and everywhere, and especially, everything related to how to treat or modulate the COVID-19 was very important these days. So these were the two papers, and then I said to the team, we would like to do something about olive oil. We would like to see what are the chemicals that they are present in there, and what can we do. But the major thing was, one of the major issues right now everywhere is the aging, Alzheimer's disease, neurodegenerative disease, with Alzheimer's being number one, and of course Parkinson, but also dementia. This is really something, and as a matter of fact, I have my mother at the last stage of dementia, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate all the research of that. So Alzheimer's disease, I'm not going to take that much time. Everybody knows we have millions of people that they suffer from Alzheimer's disease, and essentially, you know, they have the plaque formation, they're going to be dying, and do that. So what we did is, I put this team together, which I really enjoy working with them, and then what we did is, essentially, it's, again, University of Athens, Imperial College, Temple University, and our School of Public Health. And essentially what we did is, the whole idea about that is how we can take chemicals, phytochemicals that are present either in olive oil, or even in the leaves of the olive tree. And the whole idea is, you want to get compounds, not just empirical compounds. You want to get compounds that you will be able to measure them in the blood of people in epidemiological studies. So in other words, they are standardized for measurement with utilizing mass spectrometry. So this is just a small portion of the compounds, and I'll tell you how many we had for this study. But the whole idea is that you get these food molecules and you put it with proteins and the network propagation, biological functions, and then you're trying to do this intercom, and you're ending up with, statistically, this is the algorithm that we developed, that, you know, it could tell you how these agents could affect either positive or negative, these pathways involved in a particular. We also did involve a third parameter, a third way of data that we did is we put also the PDR, which means all the drugs that are available for prescription. We incorporated this and tried to make better sense on that. So essentially, we started with 1673 EVO compounds, and this came from Nicholas Thomaidis' database. And this is the libraries that I was telling you. This is important. This is what we need to develop. We need to develop libraries of compounds that we have particular retention time and over the charge. So in other words, if you run them on a mass spec, you can identify what it is. So we take this, and we also got about 3,400 genes associated with Alzheimer's disease. We have an expert-curated database. We have identified genes that are relevant to Alzheimer's disease, and then using the string, we select protein-gene interactions relevant to this, and we identified 73 genes. Then we incorporated all this, and we ended up with 15 compounds that they have the potential of to have a pharmacological action. And that's what we're doing right now, is we're doing the preclinical studies in either single or the combination of those, and compare those with olive oil itself. Now, remember, we're not doing this for just develop one magic compound. We're doing this to identify a mechanism by which the Alzheimer's disease can be disrupted. So from these 15 compounds, one of the things that scored higher is the luteolin. It's either glucoside, galactoside, and you know, the hydroxyphenolglycoaldehyde on that was also another compound. And it's so funny because I gave last week a talk on a Mediterranean diet, and somebody from the audience said, well, you're never going to find these compounds into the blood. And I said, here is the answer. You're going to get the metabolites. This is why you have to have all these databases, and you have all the data that you can identify what it is. Anyway, to make a long story short, and this is when I tell you that it's not science fiction. It is real science that it can really drive experiments. So luteolin, there is existing literature, and this is amazing. As you can see, luteolin has been identified as a potential therapeutic agent with beneficial effect on neurodegeneration, neuroinflammation by modulating the synaptic transmission. So what we found matches what it is. Now imagine, we all have been doing all these experiments trying to find one compound or second compound and everything. So here is the idea that we can collect a bunch of agents that are work together present in the olive oil. Now, a lot of word, and somebody mentioned in the earlier the work of Antonia Trichopoulou. Antonia is a big believer that every single compound from the olive oil is very important for our health. It's not only the phenolic antioxidants, in everything that they can work together to promote that. And this is the message that I want to go. So this is, we're just trying to find mechanisms by which we can explain the beneficial effects in here. And this was, I was again on a trip, and I got a phone call from Washington Post the other day. As you can see, May 6, 2024, it was pre-release of this paper by Harvard University, which says that the olive oil, the diet quality, and really lower the risk of dementia-related death. As you know, once you get to the dementia, there is a neurological condition that eventually you're going to stop eating, you're going to start in the wasting syndrome, and you're going to end up. So this study is, it's again it's an epidemiological study, and I'll show you the comments, and I'll tell you where we need to go. But the point here is independent. If you look at the conclusion, you cannot read anything in here, but you can take my word for it. Independent of the diet, having olive oil, not even extra virgin olive oil, just olive oil on your daily basis reduces your risk for dying from dementia by 30%. That's a big number, okay? So of course, all the media took it up, and you see the Washington Post got it, and olive oil associated with low risk of dying for dementia. So, but we have to hear what everybody says. And of course, this is a good study. It's an epidemiological study, has been taken with controls and everything. But look what the expert says. And I have mine, but it's okay. So David Knopman said, this is a very good study. However, we need to have more randomized trials to make this result more strong and more believable by everybody. And this is the point that I want to make. It is not anymore for the future of human health that individuals should start going all these studies. What we should do is we should join forces. We should develop big cohorts that can be used for randomized trials, and we can do that. This is very important. We need to have the databases with the phytochemicals. We need to develop mass spectrometry assays that can be high throughput. So if you have 1 million people, they can run your blood samples very quick, and then you can identify that. And combining this with all the clinical data, you can make this case. And of course, you know, I also talked to them. I said that this is very good. It's very good, a very phenolic antioxidants. I thought Rosa Van Noo was going to be here today, because I also said that in addition for drinking 2 tablespoons a day, I also, you know, we cook it, of course, every day, but I also said I put it on the top of my ice cream. And I'm saying that because last time we had a meeting in here, Rosa was saying that putting some extra virgin olive oil in your ice cream, it is really good. Anyway, to make a long story short, I'm moving forward, and I'm saying that we are, for many, many years now, I'm trying to develop, along with Tassos Kyriakidis, what we call the Olive Science and Health Program, which eventually want to do it as an institute. But it's not been approved yet, because we have to go through several steps in order to get the Yale's approval for this. So the idea is that we have a vision for advancing the research, scholarship, education, prevention, and practice. So what we want to do is want to bring people together. We're not conducting research. We're doing some research, of course, at Yale, but we don't want to compete with people. We want to work with all of you, creating big cohorts, creating all the necessary frameworks, just as the European Commission does in several aspects, and develop something about olive oil and Mediterranean diet that we can move it forward. So the whole idea that I have, and this is what I have been proposing now, is I would really like to have a center for research on olive sciences. This center will serve as a centralized hub to facilitate and oversee various research initiatives focused on the understanding of health benefits associated with olive oil consumption. So the center would play a pivotal role fostering collaboration among research institutions and experts in the field. That's what essentially we're looking for. And how we're going to do that? It can be a research coordination. Again, we don't want to steal anybody's ideas. We're going to bring them together. We want to bring somebody that has an expertise in one field and bring with the other and get maximum impact for this. Also, we want to do data sharing and analysis. In every field that we do, we did genomics, we do metabolomics, at least, you know, both in European and American institutions, you are obliged to make your data public, okay, so available to everybody. And this is, again, needs to be a coordination so people can start using each other's results once it's been published and so on. So this is the second area. The third area is we need randomized trials. We said we need clinical trials. We need somebody, we need, not that Yale will do that, we need to create all this framework that will coordinate all this research, and this is very important. Finally, resource centralization is that we can act as a central repository for relative literature, resources, and expertise. Also, you know, the major frameworks and cloud-based databases and libraries that everybody can be used, and this can be, you know, from literature to hosting conferences and also offering training opportunities. We need to train our new generation into this research, and we need to bring the highest technologies in order to move on that. We also need to have a community and outreach. This is very important. We need to go with the people. I mean, I do toxicology at Yale, and all my students at the end of the day, they come and ask me, can you tell us now how we can identify if an olive oil is good? And when is it good, where to buy from the supermarket, especially on health benefits. So we need to have this communication with this, not only just to sell the olive oil, but also we need to get the trust in order to have those big cohorts. People need to participate. You need to communicate your research with the large communities, including, you know, all levels of the communities. We also need to collaborate with industry and partnering with olive producers, distributors, and the stakeholders in the industry could help to ensure research efforts align with real-world applications and contribute to the development of high quality of products. This is very important. Also, how we can utilize all these earlier techniques that I told you with the artificial intelligence, that we can make it better. But the most important thing is this, policy advocacy. How we can really make legislation, how we can, our research could help to changing some of the rulings that exist in European Commission and in FDA in United States. This, I think, all the efforts should be focusing to that policy advocacy. Okay, so what I'm going to go through, as I told you, we started in 2017. We started this series of the Olive Science and Health Program, which eventually, as I told you, would like to go as an institute. And the first meeting, we have the Yale Symposium on Olive Oil and Health. We held the first one at Yale. We did the second one in Delphi, in Greece. We did the third one in Jaén, here. And the next one was in Rome. We did the last one in Portugal, and I will tell you later, we're doing the sixth one, we're doing it in Crete, Greece, in December 1 to 5. And we have a lot of people coming from all the areas, and it has really good success of bringing people together. So what we're doing in here, we're not just getting together, and we're going to try also, we did it. Also, when we had the meeting here, we're trying to make some conclusions. We try to communicate that. So what we did on the, in Rome, we put a Nutri-Score statement that will make it available to European Commission and also to individual countries, because we were opposite of what the Nutri-Score was proposing, especially going to the olive oil. In addition to that, we responded also to the WHO statement for obesity. This is what I'm talking about, advocacy. This is what I'm talking about, bringing people together. We all signed that, and this has been distributed. It was sent to WHO and everything. So with that, I would like to invite you to the 6th International Yale Symposium on Olive Oil and Health, which is going to be in December. The webpage should be up very soon, but we would love to have you all here, there, and I'm looking forward to discussing more of these initiatives here the next couple of days. With that, I'd like to thank you very much. This is some of the pictures. We have one. We were invited to present this vision into the Vatican several years ago. And then that picture over there, the big one, you can see Antonia Trichopoulou is also, Antonia Trichopoulou is right there. That was from the Portugal meeting. And this is a tree from my hometown, which is about 3,500 years old. And this is my father and my brother that unfortunately have lost them both, but they both had a big passion for the olive tree. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Vasiliou. And we'll save the questions for the end. I would like to invite the next speaker, Profesor José Ordovas, from Tufts University in Boston. Nos va a hablar un poco sobre crononutricidad y también sostenibilidad y cómo integrar estos conceptos. Profesor José Ordovas, the floor is yours.
¿Su nombre era? José Ordovas. Yeah. Well, thanks, Óscar, for the introduction, and to the organizers, of course, for inviting me to be here with all of you. And initially, I had Óscar a little bit confused because he thought that I was going to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. My goodness, I couldn't do that after Vasilis. Vasilis talked to us both from the heart and the brain. And what I have decided is to spend some time with you talking about a topic that is also very important for sustainability, which is time. I mean, we could treasure many things, and but time is something that it comes, it goes, and you cannot keep it. And that aspect is also important for health. So here we are going to talk about chronobiology, chrononutrition, precision nutrition, another concept that is very important. And everything is integrated as part of the topic of this specific session. Chronobiology, well, it's just the... Okay. It's funny, this pointer. Is the scientific study of time, right, in our biology. And usually we focus on the circadian rhythm that happens more or less every 24 hours. And all our body, all our genes are kind of regulated according to that circadian rhythm, preparing for the next minute, for the next hour, right? Within that, we have the chrononutrition. The chrononutrition is, as you can see, is eating according to those patterns, those circadian patterns. And then it's extremely important to synchronize the diet with the circadian rhythms. If we are able to maintain that synchrony our brain, our gut, our heart, our adipose tissue, everything is going to be synchronized like a big orchestra. If you have if they are not synchronized, then what you have is noise. What you have is physiological noise. What brings that physiological noise? In the current society, many things. The jet lag is the most obvious thing, and I am an example of that. Having spent the night in a seat trying to sleep, and but there are other things. The social jet lag, in which because we have all these screens around us and all these clicks that we have to do out to our friends, saying that we like or dislike what they post. But also, we are moving into a society in which more and more people are not working the normal shift. For example, in the US, about 20–25% of the working force is working non-normal shifts, meaning, in most cases, the night shift. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So anyway, if this central clock, which is in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is in coordination with the peripheral clocks that we have in all our organs, everything is fine. We have a healthy individual. But if that doesn't happen, because of the jet lag or because of genetic reasons, we'll explore some of them later, then you have a person that the most apparent phenotype is obesity, but then you have cancer, you have mental problems, and so on and so forth. All right. So I don't know how to advance this. Is this something that is the privilege of humans? No. The whole nature is bound, follows rhythms. The animals that we know, and it's not only this circadian rhythm, the monthly rhythms, the seasonal rhythms that have spectacular changes in the phenotypes of many animals, even the tidal rhythms and in marine life, right? They are synchronized, or feeding is synchronized with the tides. Reproductive rhythms, photoperiods, and so on and so forth. So the entire nature moves based on that concept of rhythms. And this is just because in this continuous change, we, or the owl or whatever, it has to be ready to what comes in the next minute. Their biology has to be ready. Somehow we have to connect with the topic, but that's something that Vasilis has done in an excellent way, chapeau. There is connection between chrononutrition and environmental sustainability, reduce food waste. If we eat when we have to eat, and what we have to eat, probably there is less waste, right? Food waste. That it will influence in the problem that we confront nowadays, which is, I mean, there are, you don't have to believe always statistics, but in the US, you have these numbers, whether they come from the Washington Post or the New York Times or whatever, that 40% of the food that is produced goes to waste at one point or another of the cycle, right? So just eating according to your biology could save some of that food waste. Changes in food production and energy use, distribution of food. I remember seeing a documentary about how efficient are in Japan. They have the distribution channels so tuned up. They have studied what people are buying in the morning, in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, in the evening, and the distribution of the things that are on the shelves change continuously during the day according to those needs, right? So there is no, however, in the US, at the end of the day, you see the shops just throwing and throwing stuff that is perfectly edible. Well, if you integrate artificial intelligence, you understand the population, and then you can save there. And then you get also into the seasonal eating and local agriculture, which is the kilometer zero that we have discussed sometimes and so on. So all these rhythms can contribute to the environmental sustainability. And we are going to leave that for a while, and we are going to talk about what is more the topic of my research, which is the precision nutrition in practice, but focusing from the chrononutrition aspect. And this is the most simple visual that I can put to you. We are different in terms of our behavior. Some people are larks, some people are owls, some people are morning people, some people are night people or late people. And that translates also not only in when we prefer to work, but also when we prefer to eat. And there are some people, I mean, you have a bunch of people here, and you have different patterns. The conventional pattern, which is the one that most people have, and then you have the peaking a little bit early, right, in the day, then you have the late lunch, it peaks a little bit later, and then you have those in which time doesn't matter, because they are continuously eating. And probably you know people like that. The grazing pattern. Okay, so what defines if you are an owl or a lark? And those are oversimplifications, of course. One is the physiological component, which is, for example, genetics, right? But then also the age, your disease status, and so on. Then you have the behavioral and personal preferences. And as you see, alcohol and caffeine consumption is one of them, the chronotype, the sleep, and so on, and then the cultural and environmental. And that you will see in one of the next slides, how evident it is in different countries, how culture impacts in when we have our food. We talk about in the inner circle, we talk about things that were physiological, like genetics. Is there a genetic component to being an owl or a lark? And the answer is yes. But it's not something that is definitive. It's nothing that is you cannot escape to, because like it happens for obesity, like happens for so many other common disorders, the genetic contribution is about 20%. So yes, there is an internal push towards one thing or another, but the other circles, they are going to impact also in which direction you move, towards the morning or towards the evening. And important, and you could imagine that this is the case, in the GWAS, the genes that have been found to be significant for the chronotypes are expressed primarily in the brain and also in the pituitary. So you see the importance of the mind and the importance of the hormones. Going back to that, let's go one step further, and you we know this. When it comes to dinner, for example, that is something that really varies among different cultures and different geographical areas. And then there are extremes like the Scandinavian countries that you can have dinner between 4 and 5, and you have the other extreme, which is Spain, that don't try to book a restaurant before 8 o'clock in the evening. So, and you have all kind of variations in different places. Is that genetic? Is that social? I will say that is like everything that we deal with, a combination of both, right? The latitude in which people live is important, and the genetics are also involved. So it's not as simple as just larks and owls, because we have more discrete, more granularity in the chronotypes that may be important for health. So we have the lions, right? And you see below what characterizes the schedules: 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., most productive in the morning. Then we have that's not a typical lion, it's a typical bear, obviously. There is a typo. And then you have the wolf, and then you have the dolphin that they seem to be always going, like that advertisements of batteries that we had many years ago in Spain. All right, so examples of how that impacted. And we hear this morning Pepe Lopez Miranda speaking about the cardio prep, so I don't have to stop too much into the telling you about the study. And is another one of those studies that are hallmarks in terms of how to conduct an intervention study in order to prevent cardiovascular disease, in this case, secondary prevention. And it was published in Lancet. It's amazing that it has been already 2 years since the publication. And as it happens with Predimed, the Mediterranean diet did a little bit better, or significantly better, than the low-fat diet when it came to the prevention of secondary events. So that's good. Now, that applies exactly the same to everybody? Well, we know that there are sex differences already, but there are also differences in terms of the chronotypes. And here you see how these are baseline values. And then what we see is that when it comes to the adherence at baseline, these people were not randomized yet, to the Mediterranean diet or the low-fat diet, there was a significant difference, with the morning type being more adherent to a Mediterranean diet. And the same we see for physical activity, more physical activity among morning types than evening types, intermediate types, the finches, being in the middle, and let's skip, all these things, wake time, bedtime, and so on, same pattern. And let's go to something that is a known risk factor for cardiovascular disease, like is triglycerides. And then you see that 127, the morning types, 129 for the intermediate, not significant difference, but 153, much higher values of triglycerides for the evening type. Okay, so that was baseline. And you will say, well, now we randomize these people to 2 different diets, and the diets are so strong that they are going to cancel the effect of the chronotypes. Well, the chronotypes survive to the diets, because you can see here how, for example, for triglycerides, You see the evening type, higher triglycerides all the time during the study, or at least the first 4 years, and the morning types being lower. If we go to HDL, you see the reverse. If you go to CRP, inflammation, an inflammatory marker, you can see how the evening types have higher levels all the time, independently of being on a good diet, regardless if they were randomized to the Mediterranean or to the low fat. And then when it comes to homocysteine, the same thing. So you see how important is your behavior, your circadian behavior when it comes to risk factors for disease. So how we can interpret that is that evening type subjects, they end up with lower physical activity, more sedentarism. They tend to eat later, and we will see later how important that can be. And sleep, they go to sleep later and longer sleep duration. And we all know that sleeping less is a risk factor for obesity, but don't think that the more the merrier, because sleeping more is not protective. And then you have a lower robustness of the circadian rhythm. Ideally, a young people, it will have big amplitude in the cycles during the 24 hours. And as you age, that amplitude flattens. And that's why, that's one of the reasons why, as you age, you tend to nap during the day and remain awake during the night, because you don't have this clear message of the, hey, it's day, you have to be active, right? Or it's night, you have to be sleeping. Okay, so at the end of the day, punch intended, here you have the metabolic syndrome, in which the lipid metabolism is affected the wrong way. You have more inflammatory markers and more homocysteine, just for being an owl. It's a nice animal, but when you translate it to humans, it doesn't seem to be the wiser move. We already mentioned the clock mechanism, that is the central is here in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but the reason why we talked before, say before about being coordinated or not being coordinated is because the central clock, it just serves as a point of reference. But that doesn't mean that all the different organs follow exactly this. And this is why we have, as I mentioned, the jet lag, because there is a lack of synchronization between this clock and, for example, what the stomach is perceiving, or the liver, or even the microbiota. The microbiota is there totally in the dark. You would think that there is no subject to these ups and downs of the circadian rhythm, but it is, because it's not only the light or the dark that trains the circadian clock or the biological clocks. It's also when we eat, when we exercise, and this is why is that there's a difference between what is happening in the time that marks the central clock and your different organs. So the first gene that was discovered, it was called clock. Not very original, but it works. And here you have a direct example of a genetic variant in a gene that is central to the clock mechanism. And depending on the genotype that you have, CC or CT plus TT, you see that, okay, whatever. you eat more calories per day, that translates into an increased waist circumference. So what happens if you have this dysregulation of your clock gene? More caloric intake, more cytokines, impaired sleep, higher total abdominal obesity, and probably more metabolic syndrome and more cardiovascular disease. And the other figure below demonstrates something that geneticists have, it's a trap that the geneticists have fallen for many years, that we have been focusing our research in white Caucasian populations and extrapolating the results to the entire world. That's not the case, because depending on your ancestry, the frequency of these alleles is very, very different, as you can see it, or better if I don't show it. You can see it here, that Asians, Europeans, and African Americans, they have different relations of those CC, TTs, and CTs. So if you want to give personalized recommendations and do precision nutrition, you have to work with the information of the population that you have in your hands. Let's go back to Predimed. And we hear about Predimed also this morning. But also, we look at this. I don't have to explain you that figure. You have seen it hundreds of times. But we look also to see if we could extract some information here, taking into consideration time, that could help us with precision nutrition. And in this case, again, it's the clock gene. And remember, in the case of Predimed, this was a primary prevention. It was not a secondary prevention. These people didn't have diabetes. Excuse me. It's not that they didn't have diabetes. They didn't have cardiovascular disease. But the people that remain free of diabetes during the 7 years of the study, in the control group, the low-fat group, were the same whether they have the CC genotype or the CG or GG genotypes. Genetics didn't seem to do anything. But the group that was in the Mediterranean diet, you see how the curves split. And now you can see how those that carry the G allele, they seem to be protective from incidence of diabetes during that time, and that is very different than what you see for the CCs. Okay, so somehow the G allele is protective, and it shows, but only when you expose people to Mediterranean diet, not when you expose them to a low-fat diet. And the same happened with a stroke. Here you can see how in the control group there was hazard ratio was a little bit lower, protective, but didn't make it in terms of statistical significance. But it did make it as being statistically significant when these individuals were on the Mediterranean diet. So the G allele was protective in that combination Mediterranean diet and the G allele. So thinking about that future of precision nutrition, you can see that when we are able to do this in the population and so on and so forth, if the clinician or dietitian encounters somebody with a G allele, it knows that if you have to choose between a low-fat diet or a Mediterranean diet, you choose the Mediterranean diet. Here, in this case, we talk about the clock gene. I mean, it's a direct connection, right? It's one of the central clock genes acting in the brain and so on. But sometimes the action takes place in the peripheral tissues, like is the case of the adipose tissue. So the next example that I am going to show you is also with Mediterranean diet, and this is work that we conducted in collaboration with Marta Garolet here nearby in Murcia. And these people were following her program of Mediterranean diet and group advice and so on and so forth. And then two groups were noted. Some that were more successful and people that were less successful. However, odd enough, they were behaving the same, they were eating the same. So what made the difference between more or less success? The difference was the time at which they were eating the main meal of the day here in Spain, which you know that is in the middle of the day. So again, the earlier people were more successful than the later people, right? And why they were early or late, there was a slight contribution also from the clock genes. As you see, the frequency of the different genotypes was different between before and after 3 o'clock, but it resulted in an increased HOMA, less success of the program, and a trend towards the eveningness. Okay, so according to this, and from the whatever. From the perspective of public health, you will say, well, yes, let's bring to the to Congress or Senate a law saying that everybody in the country should be eating before 3 p.m. Right? Well, that may not run very well, probably will not be approved, but in addition, it will be against what we are pursuing, which is the precision. In this case, we didn't look at direct clock gene. We look at a gene that was downstream, but still regulated by the clock genes, that was perilipin. Perilipin is the major protein in the adipocyte. It just is around the fat in the adipocyte and protects that fat from being catabolized by lipases. And look how nice is the difference between those that are T carriers for this polymorphism here, in which they couldn't care less about time. They were responding to the diet equally, independently of the time. But the ones that were AA carriers, look at the huge difference between eating late or eating early in terms of the success in losing weight with exactly the same program. So this is another example of how we can contribute to precision nutrition, modulating not what people eat, but when people eat, if you know their genetic characteristics. So in terms of the impact of precision chrononutrition, it's evident that we could have a health cost reduction because people will be eating what they need and when they need it, and that will decrease metabolic syndrome and probably other things like cancer and so on and so forth. And then the other things that Vasilis was talking about, this smart energy use in agriculture, vision for a sustainable future, and so on and so forth. Okay. And I will finish bringing the other pillar of health, which is sleep. We talk about the importance of nutrition, about the importance of physical activity. Sleep is very important. And that's something that we feel every day. So this is part of the PESA study. And what we did in the PESA study is to look at the arteries of people according to the number of hours that they were sleeping. And then remember that I say that more is not better. So you have more arterial involvement, calcification, or damage to the people that, especially in women, that sleep more than 9 hours. But the moment that you start getting into less than 6 hours, then you can start having more arterial damage than those that are in the middle, which is what we have always here. You should sleep between 7 and 8. It's not only important the amount, it's important the quality, and we find the same thing in terms of the fragmentation of quality of sleep. If you keep waking up, it doesn't matter if you sleep the 8 hours, but it's fragmented and waking up and having nightmares and so on and so forth, your arteries will suffer the same. We also mentioned earlier the fact that more and more of our society is having to work of hours. And this is from the factory, the car factory in near Zaragoza, in which obviously is working 24 hours per day. And then you have people that work normal hours, and you have people that work the night shift. And then we did the same thing that for the study, the PESA study, which is to look at their arteries. And as you will expect, the ones with the normal shift, they have healthier arteries than the night shift. But there is another third group of the population which flip-flops. So 1 month works in the morning, the next month works in the night shift. Well, those were the worst in terms of their arteries, because somehow we become resilient and say, okay, well, I have to work during the night. I have been doing it for years. The biology gets used to that. But the problem is when you push yourself to one style, and then suddenly you turn the wheel 180 degrees and go to work in the night, and like that, that's the worst case scenario, because those are the people that have more arterial disease. And just more about the sleep and in this case, the adherence to the Mediterranean diet. This is a nice study here in Spain, where we see that the adherence to the Mediterranean diet improves sleep, both at 16 and 34 gestational weeks. And that's important because during the quality and quantity of the sleep of the mother is going to impact somehow the epigenetics of the baby. And we know that is going to follow the health of this individual for the years to come. And we have this study, PREDICT, in which is a collaboration of different universities and the private sector. I am not going to go into this, but also here what we look is about the response of the glucose response after breakfast, depending on your sleep. If you have a nice sleep, your excursion of glucose, it was less. If you sleep less, your excursion of glucose is more. So you have higher risk of diabetes. And it's also interesting that if you, just like the factory workers, if you change your sleep and one night you just have a bad night, that is reflected the following morning in terms of the excursion of glucose. So just being regular is important to maintain the health. This is in terms of precision nutrition, One of the questions that we get most often is, but is that going to work? We don't have real evidence that the precision nutrition is doing better than the regular dietary recommendations. And yesterday afternoon, this paper was published in Nature Medicine, where we demonstrate that when we put people into a personalized diet versus a good advice, you have better triglycerides, you have more weight change, and more change in waste, not much in terms of LDL cholesterol, but also you have better energy, sleep, mood, and hunger that when you receive the personalized dietary recommendation. So that's very promising for the future, because that is starting to ask a question that we get very often. We have been working for a long time in precision nutrition, but we have not demonstrated yet that that one was going to work better. Well, this paper, this data is the first time that it's shown, because it was published, as I say, yesterday evening. It shows that precision nutrition could do better than regular advice. And the future, well, will be walking around with these sensors that will capture what we eat, when we eat, our heart rate variability, and all these kind of things. And all that will be analyzed by that artificial intelligence and machine learning, and it will be a feedback to the individual, to the physician, or whoever is in charge of the health of the individual. Is that very far? Well, I will say that the future is now. The problem is that that future now is not for everybody. It's just for a very few that can afford this. So our goal is to make this available to everybody in an ethical manner. Okay, and we have been focusing on the individual, but in the same way that we have those different circles for the chronotypes, we have the different circles in terms of the socio-ecological framework that we have to take into consideration, in which everybody contributes to the health of the individual. The inner circle, the neighborhood, and the large societal circle that includes many of the things that we talk about sustainability. So our future is to collect information about all that, and with these tools that Vasilis mentioned earlier, and I just touched very briefly, will be able to provide the right information at the right time to every one of us. And we could then finish something related to age and healthy aging without naming the blue zones, and we have people here that are very familiar with them, especially Loma Linda. And, well, people have been looking for the common denominator, and in terms of the food pattern. Food pattern is, you know, natural food and physical activity, but you see something that is common to all these, in all these figures. These people seem to be happy. So if you want to be in good health and have a healthy aging, you don't have to go probably into all these genome-wide analysis and methylation and all these kind of things. Just try to be happy. This study in the Netherlands, in Scandinavian countries, is clear. Laugh lots, live longer. And from Harvard, we have what makes us happier and healthier. This is just to have good relations, good friends, good family, and just being happy, as simple as that. And probably that will trump many of the genetic predispositions that you may have in terms of these chronic diseases. And with this, I just want to finish indicating that we want that kind of world in homeostasis and equilibrium in which we take into consideration these many things that we have many times ignored, despite their importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ordovas. And last speaker of today from Loma Linda, California, Professor Sabate, Professor of Nutrition and Epidemiology. And he's going to give us some considerations about the sustainability of olive oil. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thanks to organizers for inviting me, and thanks for the ones that still resist until the end. I don't know if you are dolphins or wolves, or maybe you are here just forced by the circumstances of the environment. Anyway, I'm going to have some considerations as far as the sustainability of olive oil. These are my disclosures, and the main one is that I published a book that is called Environmental Nutrition, Connecting Health and Nutrition with Environmental Sustainable Diets. And I'm going to present some of the ideas from this book. And okay, these are the 4 points that I'm going to cover. And I'm starting for the first one, what the current food systems brings to nature. The second one is the 4 food determinants of sustainable diets. Then are olives, I'm thinking the primary source of olive oil, sustainable. And finally, what is the role of olive oil in the context of sustainable diets? The first one, the current food systems. There is quite a complex interaction, I would say, trilemma, between diet, environment, and health. On one side, the food systems and the dietary patterns are the key determinants of nutrition and health. But the same food systems and dietary patterns are responsible for dramatic changes in the health of the planet. The health of the planet impacts on the production of the foods and in the diet patterns. And finally, there is a trilemma that we have to solve. Just in a few numbers, the food systems, and that goes from agriculture to really the way we consume and the leftovers, so on and so forth, is responsible between 20 to 30% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. 80% of this is due to livestock production. 30% of the world's energy is devoted to the food systems, much more than industry, transportation, or any of these things that have paid much attention. And finally, 70% of all human water use is used or employed in agriculture. To maintain planetary health, I'd say a primary objective nowadays, we have to do 2 things, very simple. One is limit the use of Earth finite resources, and the other one is avoid further environmental degradation. Why so? Because one impacts on the other. And here we have the food, diet, environment, and health interactions. The food systems impacts both on individual and population health, as we have seen, through many lectures today, but also impacts on the health of the planet. But the health of the planet just stays there doing nothing, basically impacts on the individual health and retrofits to the food systems and dietary patterns. And here are the things that happen. And then in red, the impact of the health of the planet on both the food systems and also the individual health. So, what are the three basic solutions that have been proposed to solve this conundrum? One is improvements in agricultural technology. You will have some of these tomorrow afternoon, in which, is going to be a discussion in this Congress. The second is reduction of food losses and food waste, because if less food is lost, that means less food is needed to be produced and is going to be less impactful on the natural systems. And finally is a shift on the food choices, both of individuals and at the population level. None of the three in isolation will solve the environmental crisis. And there are repeated studies and modeling studies and computing showing that the three are needed to really win the battle and to have a planet that recovers the health and is able to sustain us and our future generations. So, the second point, what are the food determinants for a sustainable diet? What is practical advice for ourselves, for our mother-in-law, for our clients, and for everyone that really wants to pay attention? Very simple. First of all, what is a sustainable diet? There are many definitions, but I like this simple one of the WHO. Of the Food and Agriculture of the FAO. Is basically those diets with low environmental impact that contribute the food to the nutrition security and healthy lives, not only for us, but also for future generations. In my book, I have put in simple terms what are the 4 food determinants, and they're in this scale. In gray, basically the characteristics of the foods that are less sustainable, and on the right in green is the ones that are more sustainable. Everyone's diet, any population diet, doesn't go in one extreme or the other, are all in the intermediate. And the illustration is very clear. The more we move to the right, more plant-based, more whole foods, more consumed in season, and we use all of the food that is produced, the more sustainable the diet will be. On the contrary, the more animal-based, processed foods that are consumed out of season, either imported or produced in an artificial way, and the more waste, the more unsustainable our diet will be. So, let's go into the first continuum, from animals to plants. Why animal foods are less sustainable than plant foods? In simple terms, because require more natural resources and have more environmental impact, animal foods compared with plant foods. Here we have, at the global level, if you make the pie chart, you will see that the global production of meat and dairy products and poultry and fish are responsible for 80% of the global greenhouse gas emissions of the food system. So the rest of the food groups, it has only 20%. If we have a specific food groups, we can see that the animal-based foods are at the top. That means there is more kilograms of CO2 equivalents per kilogram of food compared with the plant foods. That's just a given, that's a fact. Okay, let's go to the next one. Going from processed foods to whole foods. Processed foods, produce more greenhouse gas emissions and more resources for the simple reason that processed foods are just needed to be packaged and transported and all of these things and refrigerated in order to reach the consumer. Orange juice, even in developing countries, is sold in a plastic bag. We can have here Tetra big or whatever, but oranges doesn't need any packaging. I mean, can be sold bulk. And we can go on and on. Corn, I mean, is one thing. Corn flakes has to be in a package. So just the packaging by itself, I mean, is responsible for most of the additional resources and CO2 that it is. When we consume foods that are out of season, either are produced using high levels of or inputs of energy, or they are transported from far away, as opposed to eating foods in season. So this is also one of the things that happens. The transportation, if there are items that can be transported by boat, the impact is minimum. But really fresh foods that is transported by plane, the environmental impact is very big. Waste versus efficiency. We tend to just don't consume all the foods that are in our plate, go to a self-service and get more food than what we need to consume. At home, we get food, and we think we're going to eat tomorrow. We put into the refrigerator, and 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, I mean, the cleaning lady has to throw it away because, I mean, it has not been consumed and has been spoiled. So the more food is wasted, that means more food had to be produced that wasn't necessary. So 1/3 of the food produced at the global level is wasted. The later in the life cycle the product is wasted, the greater the environmental impact. It's not the same to have a loss of a crop, either olives or an apple, that just fall from the tree and stays there, and finally, I mean, is good for the environment, versus an apple that has been produced into an apple pie. We don't consume the whole apple pie and finally it's wasted. I mean, the more inputs of energy has been put into this apple, therefore, the longer in the food chain, I mean, the more downstream, I mean, is worse as far as the environment. So, if the global food waste will be considered a country, will be the 3rd in the ranking of the ones with more greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, after China and the US, food waste is the 3rd country in the world. So this is a major thing that nutritionists and the ones that go into working in environmental nutrition, I mean, we're very concerned about. Okay, the third point, are olives and olive oil sustainable? When Stephanie asked me to make a presentation, I started thinking about, I have to say something about olives and olive oil. So, based on the scheme that I just presented to you, I would say that theoretically, at least, olives are very sustainable foods. Why? Because they are plant foods. Because they are consumed with minimal processing. Once cured, the olives can be, stored at room temperature for long periods of time. So therefore, use minimal use of energy and theoretically have little waste. What about olive oil? Olive oil, it could be also very sustainable because it's a plant food, minimally processed, especially extra virgin olive oil. It just has, physical press, nothing else. So very different than ultra-processed foods that goes into many components, in the processing. Can be stored, I know that that's not the best, maybe for organoleptic properties and things of this sort, but in comparison to other seed oils that get rancid very quickly, olive oil can be stored at room temperature, so it doesn't need refrigeration. And finally, given the cost, have very little waste. So theoretically, we could say and conclude now that olive oil is sustainable. Well, however, concerns has been raised regarding the high water usage and the chemical inputs to grow olives. I'm not an expert. Tomorrow probably you will learn more about this, but basically there are many types of olive groves. There is the ones with a low input, the ones with intensified traditional input, and then that is modern intensive, very intensive. The more intensification it is, I mean, the characteristics change and the environmental impact do change, definitely so. And here we have the characteristics of each one. According to some reports, the low input or traditional way of cultivating olives and olive trees have greater natural value, greater positive environmental effects. However, as the intensification increases, I mean, there is a limit because have less natural value and less positive environment. Yesterday, speaking in one of you, I learned that, you know, when you plant 2,000 trees in an hectare, I mean, produce basically the same that 500 trees. So probably nature is wise and knows, I mean, the limits of the production. So by intensifying more, the curve, I mean, increases, but there is a plateau and probably goes down. Don't ask me any question about this because I'm not an expert on that. I just got that from the reports. Okay. So here we have some of the main environmental concerns as far as the agriculture of the olive trees. Soil erosion, desertification, inappropriate weeds and soil practices, and one that has taken the attention of many as far as the runoff of the soils and the agrochemicals, and that goes into the fluid bodies and is responsible for ecological disasters. So, what are the proposed solutions? Improving farming practices, irrigation, chemical application, so on and so forth, monitoring the changes, I mean, training the farmers, and researching in all of these aspects. So, things that relates to an area that I'm studying is the, you know, the life cycle analysis of the foods. There is not much published, although there is quite a lot of done, on the, so there is a relative paucity in the life cycle analysis of olives and olive oil and its environmental impacts. There is one paper that studied 15 food groups in connection with health and environmental impact. And one of the food groups was olive oil. And here it is, the paper, Multiple Health and Environmental Impacts on Foods, is by Michael Clark, one of the co-authors on my book. And basically he studied the effect in 6 health outcomes. Here you see mortality, coronary heart disease, colorectal cancer, diabetes and stroke, and also 6 environmental impacts. The scarcity on the weight relative to the waterways use, acidification, eutrophication, land use, and greenhouse gas emissions. And they presented this in the spider web. So these are the things that we are going to pay attention as far as... So the closer to the center means better for the planetary health, the farther to the extremes, worse for the planetary health. And on the left applies to human health. And here we have olive oil in all in these computations. It was seen that except for the water use, most of the dots are very close to the center. So as far as greenhouse gas emissions is very close to the center, and so on and so forth. I'm comparing olive oil with the other 2 food groups that people consider that have some fat component. I don't want to compare with the meat, because then meat is in the periphery overall. So compare olive oil with meat would be unfair from the culinary purposes and many things. But with dairy, I mean, people in many recipes, people exchange olive oil with butter or with milk and vice versa. And sometimes with many bakes or bakery, I mean, they use eggs. So I mean, I just choose out of the 15, 3 that they are somehow comparable. And you can see that olive oil, as far as the points into your right, seems to be better positioned, sorry, let's go into back, that dairy products and eggs. As far as the health effects, there is also, I mean, quite positive compared with these other ones. Here is the same data, but presented in relative risk here, and at the bottom you have olive oil, and you see that is less than 1 in most of the health outcomes compared. And here we have the same with the environmental impacts that are, they tend to be into the less, you know, in the positive side or the less negative ones. So this is what we know as far as the connection of health and planetary health with olive oil. And when this is presented in 2 dimensions, because we have now the spider web, we have the traditional histograms and different things, and now in these quadrants, in which we have the relative risk of mortality and then the average relative environmental impacts, in which the 6 factors are combined in a kind of an index. You can see that in the quadrant, or in the health quadrant, in which we have lower relative risk and lower environmental impacts, olive oil is not at, you know, in the best position, but since it's a plant food, is basically within the plant foods and is overall quite okay. Compare on the other ones that are in the periphery, that you can see are mainly from animal sources. So, finally, what is the role of olive oil in sustainable diets? Well, this is the report of the Food and the Anthropocene by the Eat Lancet Commission, in which the purpose of this was to develop a diet pattern or guidelines as far as how to eat that improve the population health as well as the planetary health. And primarily was a plant-based diet. And then here is the things that they have to limit. But let's not focus just on the limits, which are mainly some things that you already know for health reasons. But interestingly, among the many things that have to meet every culture in the world, so I mean this goes in different compromises, but at the same time, as you can see, some of the animal sources of protein goes from 0 to some number, meaning that absence of this is also recommended, but they put very low numbers. But interestingly, you have unsaturated oils, 40 grams, as opposed to saturated oils, an euphemism for not saying butter and all of these things, only 11 grams. So basically, this universal diet that could solve the problems as far as human health, but also the planetary health, I mean, promotes plant oils as opposed to animal oils or fats. If in a review of the literature, a systematic review, in which they compare different diet patterns and the 3 environmental impacts, we can see that the Mediterranean diet, for which olive oil is an essential component or primary component, has an intermediate role, I mean, compared with others. So as far as the greenhouse gas emissions, 0 means the standard diet of a country or the comparison diet. As you can see, the vegan is the one that has more reductions, followed by the vegetarian, the pesco-vegetarian, the healthy guidelines, and then the Mediterranean diet. So compared with the balanced energy, that means eating as everybody eats in a Western diet, but just adjusting the energy to the way that you don't become obese. So it's reducing calories, but not changing the food pattern or the proportion of the foods, but see the amount. That is the one with less increase as compared to change nothing. So this is as far as greenhouse gas emissions. This is the Mediterranean diet. Is you see water use. You see the Mediterranean diet is in the middle. So it's also is a reduction. And finally, with the land use, Mediterranean diet also, it gets a reduction. So I would say goes in the trend of, the ones that is better than most of the diets or the standard diet, but none, competing with the vegetarian or the lacto-vegetarian diet. So that's my final slide before the conclusions, is each one of us, each one of our clients, is in different positions. And we will be also in different positions. The issue is not to be to the extreme, but to work in this direction. So doesn't matter what velocity, doesn't matter how much you reach the goal, but if we move in this direction, we're in the right path. So in conclusions, planetary health and human health are impacted by food production and consumption practices. Olive oil offers a sustainable and healthful option, suggesting potential use as a primary global fat source. I guess the growers will be happy with this sentence. Prioritizing olive oil production may subdue the greenhouse gas emissions, but current agricultural practices imply additional stress on water resources that has to be addressed. And further research and data collections and publications is warranted to explain the potential role of olives and olive oil on a sustainable food. More research is needed, at least research that is available for nutritionists. Thank you.
Okay. Muchas gracias,
Profesor. I'm going to get water. I'm coming back.
Okay. Elena, tenemos tiempo para preguntas. Puedo invitar al profesor Parakalov, Professor Vasilis, if you could come, and Professor Ordovas, you could come. And anybody has any burning questions, or are you ready for dinner? No, it's too early for dinner here. ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? ¿Alguien que quiera hacerle alguna pregunta? ¿Está aquí el micrófono?
Well, thank you for the session. It was really very interesting. I wanted to ask to Dr. Sabaté, because you are comparing olive oil with other foods. But I was wondering myself, for example, sometimes the people is using, instead of olive oil, using avocado or using cocoa or coconut oil. I was wondering myself, which could be more sustainable or which could be more equilibrated in this health and sustainable. Estoy preguntando, ¿hago la pregunta correctamente? O?
There is an echo that I couldn't follow your question. Without the microphone, without the microphone.
Vale. No, mi pregunta es...
Take the microphone away.
Sí. Mi pregunta es, dijéramos, has comparado, ¿no?, el aceite de oliva versus huevos u otros. Yo me pregunto, como la gente está utilizando, sea en España no, pero en Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, en vez de aceite de oliva, utiliza grasa de coco o grasa de aguacate. Entonces, si ya consideramos este tipo de grasas, dijéramos, si buscamos el balance salud, sostenibilidad, ¿cómo lo tendríamos?
To my knowledge, I have not seen any study, and I don't have data, original data. I spent several years of my professional life trying to identify, the greenhouse gas emissions and computing that, from different sources. particularly since I am on the blue zone in Loma Linda, I mean, based on soy products, meat analogs, and things of this sort. So these are my primary sources, but others are taken from other sources. I do not have the data on that, and I have not seen comparisons. But I think I agree with you that that is a very important, because for practical purposes, people met food exchange. So, and what you are saying is, it will be interesting and nice to have a comparison between avocado oil versus corn oil versus whatever for both outcomes, the health outcomes and the environmental outcomes. Yeah. To my knowledge, this has not been published and put together.
Okay.
Another question, otra pregunta. Acá atrás. Y si quieres puedes hablar fuerte, que el micrófono tiene mucho eco y los ponentes no oyen.
Presentation could be, yes, see? Okay, they asked me to use the microphone. So my question is that listening to you, you are presenting which kind of diet could be more health for the planet, but I miss the nutritional point of view.
Dilo sin el micrófono, por favor.
Sí.
No. Habla español y te entenderemos. Y fuerte, o ven aquí delante. Si no, es que aquí hay eco y no se oye, no se entiende.
Vale, es que, bueno, mi pregunta es sobre la calidad nutricional de la dieta, por ejemplo, vegana, o la dieta plant-based, o algunas que están mejor posicionadas que la dieta mediterránea respecto a la salud del planeta, pero en términos de nutrición y en términos de esperanza de vida, ¿cómo estaríamos las dietas? Todo tenemos esa visión dentro de la presentación.
¿Tú quieres 1 minuto, 10 minutos o 10 años de experiencia? Yo soy mediterráneo y al mismo tiempo estoy en Loma Linda, que desde hace más de 100 años se estudia la dieta vegetariana. Naturalmente, en número de publicaciones hay muchas más en dieta mediterránea que en una dieta vegetariana, por razones obvias. Para empezar, desde cómo se financia, los grupos que están en un campo de trabajo y otros, pero hay estudios a nivel, digamos, desde bioquímico, clínico y también epidemiológico, en el que una dieta balanceada o equilibrada, vegetariana, digamos, hay más esperanza de vida, hay menos enfermedades, digamos, crónicas, etcétera, etcétera. Yo no quiero, por razones personales, porque a mí me gustan las dos dietas, ni por razones políticas, ahora poner en contraposición una con la otra. Yo pienso que las dos están en el buen camino y sirven diferentes paladares, diferentes economías, diferentes gustos. ¿Perdón, qué dices? Genomas. Diferentes genomas. Esto te lo dejo para ti.
Muchas gracias. ¿Otra pregunta? Si no, thank you very much to the panel. It was a wonderful discussion. Professor Vasilis, Professor Sabate, Professor José Ordovás. And thank you all of you for being here. Elena, ¿quieres agregar algo? Vengan todos mañana temprano, tengan una muy buena cena y muchas gracias por asistir a este primer día de esta conferencia que yo creo que ha sido excelente, me ha parecido a mí. Estefanía ha tomado nota todo el tiempo y muchas gracias a todos por asistir. Hasta luego.
Ajá.